Moving on, new polling finds improving views about President Joe Biden's ability to manage the economy. According to the latest numbers from the Financial Times and the University of Michigan, 41% of registered voters trust Donald Trump more to handle the economy compared to 37% who say they trust Biden more. As recently as February, Trump's lead over Biden was 11 points when that same question was asked. Overall, voters ranked the economy as their most important issue by a wide margin, 24 points ahead of the future of Social Security and Medicare. Meanwhile, the Consumer Price Index just crossed, showing no increase in May. Economists had been looking for a slight increase. Let's bring in the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box, Andrew Ross Sorkin. He's also a columnist for the New York Times. Also with us, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans. Christine, what do you make, though, of this sort of two-sided view on the economy? It seems both sides could be right a little bit, but it has to be put in context.
You know, it's just fascinating. You look at these numbers, and I'm sure Andrew agrees, and these are enviable numbers, except for inflation, on just about every measure of the economy. But when I crisscross the country, especially in swing states, people just don't believe it. Even when they tell me that they have record home equity, that they have record amounts in their 401ks, that they are feeling good in their business, they say that the rest of the country isn't feeling it. And so there's this real big disconnect. I think prices and price inflation scars are part of it, but there's also, I think, a gloomy hangover from the COVID years, and people are just really saying they don't feel great about the economy, even as if they look at their own numbers and their own numbers are good.
So, Andrew Ross Sorkin, what's going on with inflation?
Well, we're getting a little bit of whipsawed with some of this data, and I think we're going to find out what Jay Powell at the Fed thinks about it later today. There was an expectation that maybe he wouldn't be lowering interest rates anytime soon in this calendar year ahead of the election because it felt and seemed from the data that inflation was not coming down. Well, today it appears to be coming down a little bit. Appears that the Biden administration, you would think, would be very happy about these numbers because the markets are now suggesting that, in fact, Jay Powell will, at least they're betting that Jay Powell will be lowering interest rates sometime this year. And that's what you're seeing in the equity markets this morning. For the most part, you even also saw inflation come down just a little bit in terms of food, which, of course, has been sort of a bumper sticker for a lot of Americans in terms of how they think about inflation. The sticking point on inflation has still been housing to some degree. And then there's been a sticky issue throughout the year about elderly care at home, which actually on a year-over-year basis is up about 11%. So that's actually that's probably the one sort of bad marker in all of this. But in terms of the good marks, food has come down. And as we said, the inflation piece is a little bit lower than had been anticipated. Again, not out of the woods at all. But most folks, I imagine, if you're sitting in the White House today, are thinking this is a good day.
Christine, let me ask you, we were talking, you and I, during the break, about the gloom that you and your travels, you said, on the air. I've picked this up in my travels and on my radio show. What do you think can happen that would make Americans feel that, yes, we are doing well? Because individuals are saying, I'm doing good, but I think everything is bad. What can happen in this economic area that could kind of break everybody out of the gloom? And the Biden administration certainly needs it for their reelection.
I think two things can happen. All of these retailers, and even this morning we heard Starbucks is going to have a $5 and a $6 bundle. I think that people might start feeling better about prices if they see these widespread deals throughout the economy. There are some prices that are actually falling, and the retailers have gotten the message they can't just keep passing on higher prices to consumers. That might take some time, but people might start feeling better about that. And also just the idea that time heals all wounds. The more time we have between 9.1%, the inflation number that was the worst of inflation, more time that passes, people start to adjust to a higher baseline for prices. Maybe then that can help people feel more confident about all the other things in their life that are going the right way.
Andrew, President Biden just a short time ago went wheels up for Italy. He's en route to the G7. Talk to us a little bit, if you will, about some of the economic pieces of the agenda there. There's a lot of debate, deal not done yet, about Russian assets being seized, being used for Ukraine. There's been some resistance in Europe about that. What do we think is actually going to get accomplished over these couple of days in the seaside town there in Italy?
You know, look, I don't want to, it's not that I don't want to speculate oftentimes that's what we do. I don't think there's going to be an enormous amount of work that's going to advance things in Europe necessarily. I'm not suggesting this is all going to be theater either, but in the grand scheme of things, I think that the truth is this was on the calendar, it was on the docket, it's something he has to do. But the real focus in between all of these meetings is, of course, what he's going to do when he gets back, which, of course, is these debates coming up in well, now 2 weeks. So I think that most of what's going to happen there is not necessarily going to impact us here. And I don't think there's going to be a remarkable shift in terms of what you're seeing out of Europe, to be honest with you.
All right, CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin and NBC's Christine Romans, thank you both very much for being on this morning. We appreciate it.